Good morning, ladies, and welcome to our second installment of Tough Shin Pay Base, second installment of Megillas Esther. We are now in the second parak of Megillas Esther, and we have one more. We're going to have a third series of the series next week. And then I believe we're going to take a few weeks off for Pesach, unless we're inundated with emails if people want something on the Haggadah. If you do, just reach out to me or to Debbie Menzalewski, and we will hear you if there's enough people interested in resuming for the Haggadah. Okay, in Parak Beis, we start off, just as a review, before we start Parak Beis, we have seen so many miracles just in the first parak. We talked about last week, we talked about Koresh, that how he buried 1,080 treasures, and that Achashverosh ended up showing them at his parties. He showed all 6 treasures, national treasures a day, and how he wanted to, and how Nebuchadnezzar wanted to, he wanted to bury all those treasures. And yet later, when Hashem wants something, you can't deny fate. You can't go against Atzas Hashem Yisakum. Second great miracle of last week is that how the whole Shushan Habira became the Bira. It was before Elam, a different city in the Babylonian Empire, and then later the Persian Empire. It became the capital because they couldn't move the throne out. The throne that was made for Achashverosh by the people, the craftsmen of Shushan. We went into all that, and unbelievable, the entire capital had to move, and we know why, because of Mordechai and Esther. Third thing, we talked about Vashti and how Vashti wanted to make her own party in the Beis Hamalchus. She wanted to make a party in the royal room to upstage the king, because to show him that she's really the royalty. We learned from that how the tznius, that women never made parties, they never made parties with men in ancient times like that. That's really incredible. We also find that because of that, the women being there is going to be a whole reason why the next 2 prakim happen, which is really phenomenal. No, even in the first parak, rather, we find because we said the men overheard the woman talking, and they start talking about women because that's what non-Jewish men do when they're drunk, versus look what frum men talk about when they're drunk. I always use that as a proof when I'm teaching converts. I tell them, look how frum Jews act when they're drunk. Go to any yeshiva, they get silly, but some of them, they're hugging their rebbeim and they're crying for Mashiach. This is what frum Jews do when they're drunk. Whereas look at the rest of the world and their behavior when they're drunk. But anyways, they're thinking about women, and that's how we brought on Vashti, and that's how Vashti ultimately was killed, just because Vashti decided to make in the Beis Hamalchus. Number 4, we find, of all people, the new guy in town for the Congress, Haman, just becomes an advisor that day, and he makes this terms with Achashverosh that, you know what, you from now on should be autonomous. You should have all the power. Can you imagine what that means? Now, the king before had no power in personal things. He'd have to speak to his council. Now we left off Parak Aleph with the king now is totally autonomous in any way, and the first person that's going to suffer that will be Haman himself. And last but not least, the king would never kill Vashti. Would he ever kill Vashti? Look, Vashti was his claim to fame, his Bill Clinton for the Hillary. He was everything, and now look what happened, that Vashti ended up being killed against his will. He didn't even want it, but he listened, in this case, to Haman. Now, so that's the message of the first parak, is the opulence, the everything with that, all the coincidences, how Achashverosh became king was phenomenal. We talked a little bit last week's parak about people pleasing, and that was Achashverosh's whole goal, to help me to please every single person. These are the lessons we have to take with us, and we shouldn't be people pleasers when Purim comes. We should just be seeing what can we do versus like how Achashverosh conducted himself. So that was the message of the first parak. The second parak in Megillas Esther tells us the importance of the little people, and also how Atzas Hashem Yisakum. When Hashem wants something, that's what's going to exist, that's what's going to endure, and nothing else matters. We find that there was a story that happened many years ago. I've heard different versions of it. I'm going to stick with my original version. If anyone has something to correct with it, please edit me at the end. Let me know your version. This is the version I remember learning this story, and it's more or less the right story. So I just wanted to preface it to make sure, when I wasn't able to research it 100%, but I know this story happened. Any case, I would say about, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was, talk about little people, there was a girl from America that attended seminary in Eretz Yisrael for her seminary year. And one day she was like, they went shopping. She went to Geula shopping with her friend, and they were looking at different things. And I guess, there's different places you could buy pictures of Gedolim. So somehow, to what degree, I don't know, but they saw a picture of Baruch Ber, who was a person that was in a league, alone, special human being, such Yiras Shamayim of Baruch Ber, and such he put everything into his learning. He was willing to give up his life for his learning. It was almost like they said he was sweating profusely whenever he would learn, but he would give shir rather. They said after he came out of the shir, his clothing was soaked. To that degree, he put in effort for learning Torah and for teaching Torah. Anyways, Baruch Ber, so something she somehow, maybe slightly, I don't know what, she disparaged the picture. Could be his payas were askew or something like that, because this was a man that was in spiritual matters all day. He didn't have to deal with the physical. He was not in this world, basically. Anyways, that same day, she was afflicted with Bell's palsy. And she herself acknowledged that this probably came because she said something negative about a tzaddik. Oh, I didn't even put on my microphone. Let me do so right now. Okay, we'll see if if you hear my voice differently. Any case, so she found herself afflicted with Bell palsy. She calls her parents right away. Her father comes rushing into Eretz Yisrael, and I believe he went to Rav Steinman, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And Rav Steinman, the girl was honest enough to think that that's what brought it on. Like she self-introspected, she was thinking. So Rav Steinman told him, I think there's only one way your daughter can get cured. You have to get a minion of 10 men, and you have to go to the caver of Baruch Ber. So the father is willing to do anything for his daughter's, discomfort to be mitigated. Bell's palsy person has half the face usually is somewhat distorted. And, because she said that the tzaddik didn't look good, she ended up, she was like, girl should have aged, not looking so nice. It was really, really a humiliation for her. So the father started calling people in Europe that are known to find the Kfarim of Tzaddikim. They know to find the grave sites of the righteous. And lo and behold, there was no caver for a Baruch Ber. They didn't have a caver. So he went back to Rav Steinman, and he told him there's no known caver for a Baruch Ber. So Rav Steinman says, there's nothing you could do unless you ask the tzaddik mechila, unless you ask him forgiveness, there's nothing that can be done to help you. The father's beside himself. He doesn't know what to do. So he urges on these people in Europe, please, can you help me find the grave of Baruch Ber? So they went on some information. They knew he was buried in Vilna at the major cemetery there. And they knew, I think he was one of the last people. He died right before World War II. So he was one of the last people buried there. And they said he always asked, one of his last requests was that they found, how did they compile this information? There were 4 men in their 80s that were at the funeral of Baruch Ber that they located in the world. Maybe they were in Europe. I don't know where they were, but they found these men. They told them where the caver was. Approximately, they knew it was a few steps away from the mikveh there, and they knew he was perpendicular to his father. Now, usually everyone's buried parallel in most cemeteries, but there was no room in this case. They made an exception because he insisted he be buried near his father. He had tremendous kibbut av va'em, Baruch Ber, like treated his parents like kings and queens. Like he knew his father's favorite drink, always had it available for him. He just like everything his parents, he was an only child, and anything his parents wanted, he did. So he was buried perpendicular to his father's head. So they used a series of radar and testimony, and they found records of this cemetery. And believe it or not, a few months later, they were able to locate the gravesite of Baruch Ber. Now, P.S. the girl did get better. They found as soon as they found the caver, they put some kind of makeshift headstone in the beginning right away, and later they're going to make a headstone. They did by now, but they were the first people to have a minyan there by the caver, and the girl was cured. But not only that, there's an important message that I have from this story, and that message is, look at what one young seminary girl did. Look what she did. Because of her, the whole world had the caver of a Baruch Ber now to go to daven at. And in fact, by the next year, they put up the Matzeva by his yard site, and they had all the Kamenetzer people, because he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Kamenetz in Europe. All the people from Kamenetz came, a whole troop, to go daven by his caver. And it was all in the merit of a young girl who did something wrong. Can we know what a small person can accomplish? A small person has such power. Can't underestimate the prayers of a small person. Can't estimate the actions of a small person. Small people can cause world wars. They can do an awful lot. There's an email going around I just got yesterday saying that Putin happened to be like he was a young kid that was roaming his countryside because either his parents couldn't feed him for some reason. I don't know if he had parents, maybe he was an orphan, whatever it was. Jews helped him as a child. They fed him, they gave him food, sometimes gave him a little money. And because of that, he said he has tremendous respect for the Jewish people. Now, whether it's true, I don't know. I hope that story is true. That's what that people were, professing. But it shows you never know what you can do and how you can affect the world. And especially we have to think about that with our prayers. This Purim is a real Yom HaTfilah, day of prayer. Let's maximize it. There's a lot of groups organizing to say Tehillim on Purim. It's like Yom Kippur. They recommend daven. If you don't daven all the tefillos, you should try on Purim to daven all the tefillos, because it's a day where you can affect the world. Now, who are the small people that I'm referring to in this parak? This is how the small people make the difference. There's these people, if you open up your Megillah to parak base, we'll find them in the second pasuk, but let's get to the first pasuk first. After these things, Achar Dvarim Ha'ela, Kishoch Hamas HaMelech Achashverosh. Remember, we mentioned he was all angry, because anger is really sadness turned outside. He was really angry that his wife was put to death. He remembers Vashti, not Vashti Hamalka. He remembers Vashti, just that he misses her. Perhaps in his case, it's probably the beauty, knowing him. And he remembers what she did and everything that happened to her. It's as if he had nothing to do with it. Other people pushed this, that she should be killed. And he felt very bad. It took him 2 years to get over the death of Vashti. And he was in a very bad mood. Kishoch HaMelech, he was angry. So you can imagine nobody went to speak to him during those 2 years. You don't want to have your head cut off. So he was left alone, the king, but there were people that were dealing with him. And Pasuk Base were introduced to the Narei HaMelech Nishar stuff. Those were the pages, the butlers. Those people had to be there. They had no choice. They were getting him his shoes and his morning coffee and all the things that he needed. And those people were still around him. Those are the only people having anything to do with them for 2 years. So look what they had the audacity to say, Yivakshu lamelech naros basulos tovos mara. Let the king find for himself virgins. Let him find girls that are beautiful. Like that was their definition of the new wife. Remember, in the first parak, Achashverosh was looking for the Hillary Clinton, the Bill Clinton rather. He wants the yichas, he wants the royalty, but now I guess he feels he's been established as a king. And he's not so concerned, but who is he listening to? There's no advisors here in this parak. There's these young people, these butlers and people bringing him his food and the bartenders, and these are the people that he's listening to. The Narei HaMelech, the young, the things, the trade, the little footsmen of the Melech, of the king. They're telling him, you just need a beautiful woman. That's all you need. Now that's not necessarily true, but he tells them that. What Pasuk Gimel, the king listens to them. He doesn't hear. He's in the first parak. He was listening only to what his advisors told him, because they're Yodei Das Vadin. They knew the time. They knew what was popular. They knew what was in. And he was so beside himself. The only people he was asking advice to were the little, people cleaning up his room, and the people that were, the small people, you call them. the blue class workers, maybe even truck drivers. The little people who people take for granted sometimes can change the world. So they get all these women that were beautiful to go to Shushan Habira, to Hageh is going to have, he has a harem, and he's having all these women come to this place, and they have all their cosmetics set for them. They're calling, so you can imagine the stock of Lancome must have skyrocketed, and everyone's buying all these things like you know, all the great cosmetics. They're all going after, because everybody wants to be a potential queen, right? Wouldn't you think that that's what everybody wants? So now, and the girl, the young girl that the king is going to find favor, she's going to be the queen instead of Vashti, and he wants to do that. That's what he does. Now, of course, we interrupt this whole monologue, telling us that there was Ish Yehudi Haya b'Shushan Habira. Why are we told this? That, of course, everything that happens is for the Jews. We don't always see it, but we have to always take that to heart when history starts unraveling. So there was a Yehudi. Now, you may think that he was from Shevet Yehuda. Some people say his mother was from Shevet Yehuda, but he was really Ish Yemini. He was a man from the tribe of Binyamin. So this man, Ish means he was very important. Yehudi, we're called Yehudim. Why are we called Yehudim? Why are we called the Shevet Yehuda? Why aren't we called Yisraelim? We are called Yehudim because Lahodos, we are here to praise Hashem. Our main function in this world is to enjoy life and to see the good things in life and always turn it to our Creator and appreciate. All he wants is Lisaneg al Hashem. He wants us to appreciate what we have in this world and be happy and gracious with it, but to praise back. If we don't praise back, we're entitled people. So now what happens? His name is Mordechai. Mordechai is similar to two words, Mar Dechaya, which means a certain spice, like it was a little bit bitter. That's what the Targum says, or more drawer. That's another one. Like again, it was a spice, a little bit bitter. It was one of the spices that was used in the Ketores, that he spiced up the world. Well, in his Ketores always means like an offering. Mordechai really excelled in tefillah. That was his specialty. That was his specialty. That's why he's the tzaddik chosen for the Megillah. They say that it's brought down that Mordechai was not the biggest tzaddik of his generation. He was the fifth biggest. I don't have a list of the other four, but he was the fifth biggest tzaddik, because I just got this from a source. But he was the fifth biggest. But what he excelled is in tefillah. Like even his name is showing it to us. Ben Shimi. Now he could be called anything, but Shimi means that Hashem that listened to his tefillos. Shomea kol tfilaso. Hashem listened to. Ben Kish. Lahakish means to knock. When he would entreaty Hashem, when he would knock on Hashem's door, so to speak, Hashem would listen. And so far, by the way, of two of the four senses, we have the touch and we have the hearing. Okay. And Mordechai is already a smell. The whole name of Mordechai is a smell. Ish Yemini. The way he would teach tefillah, so he would be his speech. His speech was included in davening. So he davens. That's one. That's the speaking. Then we have the hearing. Ben Shimi. Ben Kish is the touch, and we have that Hashem saw his tefillah. He saw his tefillah in Torah. So that's his yichus ish yemini. He was a man from Binyamin. Why Binyamin? Binyamin was the one tribe that never bowed down to Esav. Why? He was never born. When all those tribes bowed down to Esav, he wasn't there. Mordechai, now he was also a descendant of Shaul HaMelech. Shaul HaMelech was impeccable in his humility to Hashem. Even when he was king, was unbelievable. And we needed him because when there was the Suda of Achashverosh, 18,500 people attended. Plus, remember, we still had the lingering sin of people bowing down to the tselem, to the pesel, to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar. That was still a stain on the Jewish people's heart. So we needed a Baal Tefillah here to send the whole world into prayer and fasting. So we always read Pasuk Vav with the tune of Echa, Asher Haglami Yerushalayim, that he was exiled from Jerusalem, Ima Hagola, with all the exiles, Asher Haglasaim Yechanya Melech Yehuda. Remember we said last week there were two exiles, two waves. One was Choresh Umaskir, the more important people. He was with Yechanya, so he was with the first wave. And then it says, Asher Hagla Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel. That's when he left. Now, if you notice, the word Gola, anything about exile, is mentioned 3 times in this verse to tell us that 3 times Mordechai attempted to return to Jerusalem. Why did he attempt to return to Jerusalem? He didn't want to live in Shushan. He didn't see, but the only reason perhaps he went back, and the only reason why he had to return, many people say he went 3 times and came back because he came back really for Esther. Because Esther, we will see in the next verse what happened. Pasuk Zayin, Bahi Omenis Hadassah. Another word for Esther is Hadassah. Hadass has a pure smell. Of the 5 senses, the power of smell is the most pure. That's why Motzei Shabbos, when we want to give ourselves an achama, that Shabbos is leaving, we smell besamim to show that we want to comfort ourselves from the loss of Shabbos. So she was pure, a pure person, pure soul. And Omein, what does Omein mean? Now, Omein means to adopt. But Omein is interesting. It's similar to the word Uman, and I don't mean in Ukraine, even though we should be thinking about Ukraine and trying to help them right now in any way we can. But Uman means a craftsman, a tradesman. You're superior in a certain craft. This is teaching us about Emunah, which is the same source, and Amen. They say if you say Amen with all your strength, it helps you get Emunah. Also, if you become a skilled craftsman, you have to work on Emunah. Emunah does not come from birth. People naturally are not maminim. It requires a lot of effort. So we have to adopt it. We have to be Omein. We have to have it be an Uman in it. We have to be a craftsman. We have to say Amen. And that's how we have Emunah. So he adopted Esther. He bas dodo. She was his cousin. Her parents passed away, and she had ein la'av va'em. She had no parents. So Mordechai adopted her. Now, there's a lot of things to say about this. Lots of things that, first of all, ein la'av va'em. The Vilna Gaon said, what does it mean ein la'av va'em? It means it can be taken on a more homiletical sense, that she gave up her childlessness. Once the good childishness. She was before, everybody's got his shtick. Some people are still jealous even at the age of 48. Some people are still, you're right. I was Makayim it many times. Anyway, so she gave up all her craziness. We all have things. In some ways we act like a child. We can have we could pout about something, get angry about something, get sad about something. It's all being childish. Now, Esther didn't employ those traits. She not only did she not have av va'em, because who says it's so relevant to tell us this in the pasuk, but in a deeper way, yes, she was an orphan, but on the other hand, she also was. She gave up that side of herself. She didn't act like a child. Now, another thing about her parents, I forgot who says this. I tried to look it up. I couldn't find it. I believe it's the Chidah, but I'm not positive. Ein la'av va'em, they say the reason why Esther was chosen to be here at this time against Amalek with Mordechai because of his tefillah. What did Esther have? She never was nichshal in kibbud av va'em. They say her father died during her mother's pregnancy and her mother died at birth. So one thing that Esther possessed is that she did not fail in her kibbud av va'em. because they say it's the hardest mitzvah in the Torah to keep. And here, Esav was tremendous in his kibbut avayim. So to be the adversary of Esav, you had to excel in your kibbut avayim. And for this reason, Esther had to be the one to go against Haman. So that was what she excelled at. She never failed in kibbut avayim. I'm sure she still had what to do. You have to, do things in their memory and but the main thing is when they're alive. I mean, of course, there's many things you can do even afterwards, and you should always, endeavor to do that. One thing I do know the Chidas said that if a person wants success in this world, he said that he should really endeavor to be strict with kibbut avayim. He said that's the key to hatzlacha in this world, is to respect from whom you came. And it's even good for us. You even get reward in this world because then you have more respect for yourself. One thing Rav Chaim Shmulevitz that Sal tells us is we forget there's three parts of kibbut avayim. One is, like to give them food and drink and to make sure their needs are taken care of. But there's tefillah. There's kibbut avayim in deeds, in kibbut avayim in your words, and kibbut avayim in your thoughts. Person has to think, in what way are my parents better than anyone else? What thing can I learn from my parents? And that's what they have to focus on when they're serving their parents, is that my parents excel in this, and they deserve respect for that. So she was the person, Ein la avayim, v'hanara yefas Torah v'tovas mareh. Literally, it means she's beautiful in general. If you looked at her from afar, she looked beautiful, and all her features were perfect too. It's not like she had this long nose or whatever else. Perfect. That's one opinion. Now, there are many that said she was a Iraq Rokes. She was green complexion and a little bit not so nice looking. Some people say that. But the Vilna Gaon says on this that she was, Yifas Toar means in general, she was a very spiritual person, very spiritual in the way she conducted herself. She looked perfect in all her, she worked on her midos. But it said the tovas mareh means that tovas mareh means even the specifics. Every mitzvah she put all her thoughts and her power into every mitzvah she performed. And in this way, she was exceptional, both ways. From afar, in other words, you look at her, she seems like such a balas midas in Yerushalayim, but even from up close, you saw her performing any given mitzvah. The way she did it was with perfection. That's what made her special. Again, I'm almost finished with my biography of Rav Shimshon Pincus Zatzal, and to me, he encompasses that. I cannot believe what efforts he put in doing mitzvahs. Unbelievable how every mitzvah, like he would go to the end of the earth to perform a mitzvah. And this is a person living in our day. I mean, there's all the tzaddikim we have many things to say about, but that's a man that really tried to perfect every single mitzvah he ever did, which was incredible. Okay, now she was lakacha Mordechai lo levas. So there's two opinions. Bas could mean that that when she became of age, he took her as his wife because she's a bias for him. And, so according to that, he married Esther. Another opinion says Bas she was his biggest Talmida. Maybe not, he didn't teach her necessarily, Torah Sheba'al Peh, but she was his biggest student in like anything Mordechai would tell her she would do. She became his biggest disciple. Now, next pasuk. So we get to, and then in pasuk Ches, the eighth verse, when the words of the king were heard and his ruling and his decree was announced, they were looking for more girls. El Shoshana Bira, Batilakach Esther El Beis Hamelach. All of a sudden, there's a very strangely worded verse. But he shama devar melech v'dasa, when they heard his decree, and they gathered a lot of women, and then all of a sudden into Shushan, and then Esther was taken to the Beis Hamelach through Haggai, who was in charge of the women. Now, why is it worded that way? So the Vilna Gaon says something that's really interesting. It brings down a medrash that the Esther, for those 2 years that he was looking for a queen, or 1 year, whatever it was, during that time, she became a fugitive. all the women were all pushing the best shidduch in the country. You're going to get the world, 127 countries under your dominion. Just think of the riches and the opulence and the kind of life you're going to live. Esther is hiding in her home. They closed all the shutters of her house, and she hid out for 2 years that no one should know about her. Women were throwing themselves in the wagons to go, and she was hiding out. She didn't want anything to do with a marriage like that. So they're gathering. Now, Rosh Sheni, somehow a miracle occurred that so far nobody found favor in the king's eyes. All those women. Interesting. So any case, what happened, they said, was one day there was a big commotion in the street, and she opened a crack, the shutter. And just then some non-Jewish women saw that there was a woman's eyes looking at them, and they reported her to the police. And against her will, she was taken. So either she could have been a married woman at that point, or she was not. But in any case, so she was taken. And then it says, Vatitav hanara be'einav. So Haggai thought she was a potential queen. She found favor in his eyes. She had all these perfumes and all kinds of cosmetics and all kinds of presents, and he gave her 7 maidens to serve her. Why did he go through all this trouble? He had an inkling she was going to be the queen, and he didn't want to in any way. First of all, she went against her will. So he wanted to make sure, that's what the Vilna Gaon said, and he gave extra stuff, afraid of her being unhappy. So she remained with them and wouldn't escape. Now, Pasuk Yud, Esther never revealed her nation and her birthplace because Mordechai told her not to say. Now, that's the trait, by the way, of Shaul HaMelech. It was so interesting when King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, became king. He didn't tell his family that Shmuel HaNavi poured Shemen HaMishcha on his head. He didn't tell anybody. That was the trait of the family of Shaul, that nobody knew anything. Like he has no sense to boast, to say anything. He kept it quiet, unbelievable. Another thing is that the real miracle in this Megillah is that no Jew ever told Esther's, for the entire time she was queen. Jews knew she was Jewish, but they didn't say a word for all. That was probably the biggest miracle of the whole Megillah, that no one told her background to anyone. They were super careful about that, and that was amazing about the Yidden in those days. So we see they're still a very holy people, despite they did the 18,000 people going to the Suda because of political reasons. They still had a lot of Yerushalayim and Torah within them at that time. Okay. So now, Pasuk Yud, Mordechai told her not to tell. Fine. We find that this is her emunas chachamim. She doesn't understand why not to tell, but he said not to tell. He felt, a lot of Rabbanim say that whenever a Jew is in public profile, let's say, president, vice president, something like that of a country, you're a high profile person, the Jews can end up suffering because of that in some ways. Because, we're not meant, until the Geula comes, we're not meant to be in high profile with the non-Jewish world, because they could end up, somebody could take it out on us. Now, in Pasuk Yud Aleph, every day, Mordechai's walking back and forth in front of this harem. Now, you have to understand, this is like Hollywood, Las Vegas, whatever. This is all these women traipsing back and forth, and who knows how they dressed and how they smelled and the whole thing. And Mordechai risked himself. I'll compare that to Achashverosh, how far he went out for Vashti. Mordechai, for his wife, or even if it's just his adoptee, he's going in front of the thing. Ladas says, Shlom Esther Umaya Seba. He wants to know 2 things. One, how is Esther faring? And what's going to happen to her? That's simple, but let's see what the Vilna Gaon says. He says 2 things. Shlom Esther, we're told that Chazal, Tovas Rishayim Ra Etzel Tzadikim. When a tzaddik is flattered by, by the wicked, he gets nervous. Maybe some people would say, I get free this, free that, free that. They're all excited, but a tzaddik is very worried that it's a test for him. He doesn't want to be lured into this world. They said that just now, this week is the yard site of Rav Meshulam David Soloveitchik, the first yard site. And here was a man, Zechrona Livracha, that was terrified to have any unnecessary objects in his house. He had things that were like 50, 60 plus years old in his house on purpose because he didn't want to get involved with this world more than absolutely necessary. So he would not for one moment forget why he was living in this world. He didn't want to forget that this is a passing episode and our main purpose is Olam Haba. He didn't want to get caught up in all that. So for this reason, he possessed almost nothing. He would not change a light bulb. He went without lights in certain rooms. No, there was a dimmer in a lot of the rooms, and he just set it on one place. He didn't fix his dimmers for years because he felt it wasn't necessary. For himself, for anything, unless it was the yeshiva. For the yeshiva, if they needed new air conditioners, he put it in. If they needed something, he gave it to them. But for himself, he was very afraid that he would get caught up in this world. So Mordechai is wondering, like, how's she faring with this huge test that she's undergoing? Maybe she's sick from it. Maybe she's like depressed that she has to go through all this. Maya Seba was physical. He was worried. Here was a man that killed his first queen, for the slightest infraction. He wanted to make sure Esther physically would be fine. Achashverosh also sensed that this was a special opportune time for the Jewish people, that if Esther, a Jewish tzaddikus from Mea Shearim, is sent to the king's harem, there must be a deeper thing for Klal Yisrael here, and he felt like he has to be available for any shilas at her beck and call, anything that is necessary, he's there. Okay, so now I'm gonna paraphrase some. I don't want to read every single verse because I want to cover the whole Megillah eventually. So each girl would come to the king. She'd have a whole year, six months in oil. Maybe we should try that, soak ourselves in oil for 6 months, maybe it could do something. And then 6 months in perfumes, and all these cosmetics. And then she'd come to the king bringing all these things. And at night she'd come, in the morning she'd go back. I guess he was trying out all the models to see who was going to suit him. What kind of low life is he? Unbelievable. And then and a woman would not come to the king unless he was called by name. But when Pasuk Tezvav, when 15, when Esther Bas Avichail Dod Mordechai, when she came, she didn't ask for anything. Only the things they forced her to take, she took. She didn't want anything extra. Please get me out of here. I don't want to be here. This is a huge test for her. And this was already the 7th year of his reign. So remember, the party was made at the 3rd year. Now we're already by the time Esther was. So he for 4 years he did not find his queen. For 4 years after the party. Now, so it says. So at the end of this verse of 15, Vatihi Esther noseis chen be'enei kol ro'eha. Esther found favor in the eyes of all those who saw her. And we have to understand this. This is beautiful vort. I saw from Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky's Zatzal. They say about Mashiach, and she was like a redeemer of sorts. They say Mashiach will be thought of as he'll be no sechen. Everyone's going to like Mashiach. And every person is going to think the Mashiach is from their group of people. Like you always wonder sometimes, from where will Mashiach come? Is he going to be a Chabadnik? Is he going to be Sephardi? Is he going to be Breslov? Is he going to be Litvish? Like, what's he going to be? And even if he isn't any of the above, how are all those groups going to want Mashiach? Like, aren't the people from a certain group going to say, what, he's missing this, he's missing that? Like, how do we understand that? How is Mashiach going to please every Jew, which has been until now a challenge? You look at the challenges today to have every Jew agree on a gadol. In our time at least. Look at the problems that we have today. It seems even more insurmountable. But here's the thing, says Rav Yaakov. And I'm definitely going to expand upon his words. Every single person, every single group has a certain advantage. Let's say, without Chabad, how many people would not be Makareved? How many people have to become frum because of Chabad? the Sephardim with their giving and feeding and the Simchas Chaim, or the Hasidim with all that they do, that they listen to, or they have a manhig, they listen to their rebbeim, they have a Selech Harav, and they try to go lifnim mishuras hadin, and the Litvish who try to go everything according to halacha and musar and going into whatever they have to accomplish. All the different groups of people. If I left anyone out, please forgive me. I'm just being very generalized. I can't go on for every group forever, but every group has something, right? Now, who do people tend to want to be friendly with, or who finds chen in their eyes? People that are like them. You say, oh, she's also into kiruv like me, or she's also into chesed like me. We're kindred spirits. We have the same kind of ideas. So they find chen in my eyes. We are the same neshama, whatever they call them. There's supposed to be lexicons of neshamas. Different people have different, inclinations. And you meet certain people in your life that are like-minded to you, and you attracted to each other because you both are serving the same type of purpose. That's why we have to get married, because we have to get someone different than us to make us perfect, because otherwise we'd just be in our little group forever and ever. Anyways, so what happens here is we find that Mashiach is going to be so perfect in every single aspect that the Sephardim will say, yeah, this is one of us. The Chabadniks will say, yes, he understands us. The Litvish will say, yes, he's one of ours. The same thing, Esther noses chen be'enei kol ro'eha, that Mashiach will be thought of as one of ours, and you look at them differently. I remember when I had one of my early children, one of my early childbirths, I was in a hospital, and the cleaner during my stay in the hospital was a Portuguese lady. And she said, "Are you Portuguese?" And like, she was so excited. She thought it was one of hers, That's how we're going to, once you found out I wasn't, then, you're a little bit disappointed. But when everyone felt Esther was one of theirs. And because she excelled in so many areas of Yerushalayim and Midas Tivus and performance of mitzvahs, that everybody felt she was one of theirs. Pasuk Tes Zayin, verse 16. So Esther now, again, against her will, Vatila Kach, she was taken, passive tense. She was taken to the king's palace in the 10th month of Teves, again, the 7th month, and he loved her from all the women. And she had chen and chesed before him. They put the crown on her head, and she was the queen instead of Vashti. Unbelievable. The lady from Mea Sharim that didn't want to go ended up going and was taken against her will. So then he makes a party. A lot of people don't pay attention to this party. Very. And I didn't know Portuguese people smile, but anyways, so we find that he made a big party. Now, we know he made parties. He was very into parties, that's for sure. But very interesting is Pasuk Yates that I would like to point out, chapter, verse 19. It says, "Ubihi kabeitz besulos shenis." Like, a lot of people just go over this pasuk and they don't realize what they're reading. He gathered, he gathered unmarried women again. Now, what does that mean? He gathered, and Mordechai is sitting in the Shar HaMelech. So what's the idea there? So the reason for the party, says the Vilna Gaon, was that he wanted to make Esther perhaps reveal. He thought, it's good to know where she's from. He wants to know that. Very important. If there's any important information, then perhaps he could pass it on, as an additional thing for to secure his kingdom even more. So they were trying to make a party, hoping maybe she'll drink a little bit, she'll become more loose-tongued, she'll reveal her background. Not happening. So as a final attempt, he got a party with all unmarried women, thinking that's what gets a woman, seeing other women there that could be potential queens, and it looks like he's maybe thinking of getting somebody else. Maybe then she'll reveal, but still she did not answer. Ein Esther Magedes. Pasuk Chaf, that Esther did not reveal her background and her nation, like Mordechai told her to, and that Esther did what Mordechai told her to do. Now, in these days, we find that let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. She totally filled his void. Okay. Right. Okay. So I have that. Now, now Pasuk Chaf, I would do want to say, Ein Esther Mageres Malotas Esama Kasher Tziba Alea Mordechai. She listens, and she listens to everything Mordechai tells her to do. Now, at the end of this chapter, we find this whole chapter happened because of the Na'arei HaMelech, because of the simple little valets to the king. So Mordechai is sitting in the Shar HaMelech. Why was he in the Shar HaMelech? So Rebbe tells us she was in the Shar HaMelech because this is not his parish, either the Lekach Yosef or his or the Vilna Gaon. He mentions that he never left. There's this certain royal area that Mordechai remained in throughout the time. He stayed there in case Esther needs to consult with him, because now she's royalty. He feels, wow, could have big repercussions for the Jewish people. I have to be present at all times to be prepared to do whatever I could do. So he was there at the Sharei HaMelech. He stayed right by the gate. Like, he didn't go too close because he didn't want to deal with all of that, but he was always on call in the Sharei HaMelech. It's like the Vatican within Rome, which has its own little special place. There was an area, royal area within the town of Shushan just for royal business. I'm sure there must be something in England as well, in London. Anyways, in Chaf, I guess we'll find out from Pat if she's listening at the end. But anyways, in those days, Mordechai was in the Shar HaMelech, and big son Viseresh, these two people who spoke an interesting language, Mordechai being in Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin had to know 70 languages. They wanted to kill Mordechai, and Mordechai heard about it, and they told Esther, Vatomer Esther Lamelech b'shem Mordechai. Esther told the king in the name of Mordechai. They wrote this down in the king's journals, that Esther said in the name of Mordechai that these two men were trying to kill the king, and this was written down in his royal journals, and they hung both of them on the tree. Now, okay, so what happened is like this, that Reb Galinsky's Zatzal tells us the following. We see in Pirkei Avos, it says, whoever says something in the name of he who heard it from, Kol ha'omer davar b'shem amro, mevi geula liolam. Whoever says something in the name of he heard it brings geula to the world, because Esther said in the name of Mordechai, and she brought the geula, then we bring the geula. How is that? How does that work? What's the mechanics of it? So Rabbi Galinsky says, saying something in the name of he who he heard it from is potentially what you're doing is it okay? It's going to be okay? A few more minutes. Okay. If you say something in the name of he that you heard it from, why? Because the essential element needed for geula is anivus, humility. It says that Mashiach can come in two scenarios: a generation that's completely wicked or a generation that's completely righteous. And what about us, the average folk? Why can't he come then? So what these two groups have in common, the common denominator between the wicked and the righteous, is that both of them realize that God is in charge and not them. Like the wicked would say, Mashiach is going to come not because of me. That's a wicked person would admit to that. And the righteous will say, Hashem kivinu lo, we helped, but what did we do? Hashem brought Mashiach. Sometimes us middle people, we think, I'm kind of righteous because I did this mitzvah last week. I did a mitzvah. I did mitzvahs. I have something to say for myself. But what we are supposed to develop is the attribute of being humble. If we can be humble people, then we can deserve having Mashiach. Now, so that's the end of Perek Beis. Let's get into Perek Gimel. Perek Gimel speaks about the rise of Haman. That's basically, if you have to say what it is, it's the rise of Haman. Now, in this Perek, after these things, Gidal HaMelech HaChashverosh es Haman. The king raised up Haman. Let's understand this, what it means. Gidal means, well, first of all, there's a pasuk in Mishlei, Lifnei Shever Gaon. Before a person falls, if he's wicked, Hashem makes him very high. The higher you go, it's in Avadia, then you fall down, you fall further. Like, we wonder why certain people are in power. because when they're going to fall, their humiliation is even worse. Everybody knows everything a public person does. Everybody's dream is to be in public eye, and everyone should admire them and love them. So all these great world leaders with all their horrific things that they do are just being revealed. They don't know what goes on with private people, but public figures, everything's going to be revealed. People find out everything about what they did. We just, I don't want to get into that right now. It's we could just think back, after certain people die, let's say President Kennedy, everybody adored him. And then they found out all these horrible things about him once he died. You know what I mean? That's Lifnei Shever Gaon. Now, but what is now and here he's from Amalek. And Amalek, has to be destroyed. So we're going to have him raised up because he's going to really fall mightily. Now, Gidal HaMelech means that he was given money. The king was so appreciative to Haman now that only now, when Esther became queen, because you got rid of Vashti, look what you gave me. I got even better than Vashti. And so he was financially, he gave him power of autonomy. So he gave Haman a tremendous amount of wealth. He was before a barber. And Vayinasehu, in the second adverb here, is that he was raised. He was given a lot of respect and honor. All of a sudden, he became prime minister, second to the king. Lifnei Shever Gaon. Now, Zeresh, they say, the Vilna Gaon says that Zeresh was Chachama Gedolah. She was a brilliant woman, Harvard scholar. She gave him all his advice. Plus, Haman had 365 advisors in everything he's going to do. And despite that, we're going to see what happens to him. Okay, so now he was the Agagi. He was from Agag, the one that was never killed by Shaul HaMelech because he thought he disguised himself in the cattle or whatever. Now, Agagi was the whole thing of Haman is that, or Amalek, is Agag was kafui tov. He was not appreciative. He was spared. His life was spared, and yet he didn't appreciate anything. And from this comes Haman. And we on Purim are supposed to be extremely appreciative. Our Mishloach Manot we want to be a makar tov to people, want to appreciate people. The whole spirit of Purim should be that of not entitlement, but what can we do for other people? So now, the Pasuk base, all the servants in the Shar HaMelech have to bow down. If you were in the royal area, the king made a certain decree that everybody in the royal area, if Haman walks by, you have to drop what you're doing and bow down to him, prostrate yourself in front of Haman. And it's not so convenient to do that when you're busy, but Mordechai would not even flinch. He would not even curtsy. He would not even bow slightly. And for sure, he wouldn't prostrate himself, either because he was wearing an idol on his neck or just because he was from Amalek. For whatever reason, that's why he refused. Now, the Pasuk Gimel, guess who comes up here to change the scene? The Narei HaMelech come up again. These small people, the people driving trucks in Canada, those small people, they appear on the scene again, and they're very upset. They can't stand the idea. The whole thing they can't deal with. And then they're asking Mordechai, why aren't you bowing and why aren't you flinching? When they told him every day and he couldn't listen to them. So, if they're coming every day telling him you have to bow down, they didn't want more. They were on the side, the Narei HaMelech were on the side of Mordechai because they hated Haman. They resented having to bow down all the time to him. So Haman decides to destroy all the Jews. And in Nisan, he throws some type of lots. He throws lots to decide what's going to happen. And finally, it comes out in the month of Adar. And I think we're going to conclude right here for this week. Next week, we're going to take up the rest of the Megillah, Mitzvah Hashem. I would have gone on a little longer, but something is going on in the background of my house right now that I have to deal with. And we'll find out what happens to Haman, and we'll try to get a deeper idea into the Megillah. I thank you all for listening. And I thank Elisheva Shields for her beautiful work that she does for us every single week to make sure this Zoom goes smoothly. Thank you for listening. I wish you all an amazing Shabbos. Parshas Zachor. Parshas Zachor, says Rav Nassim Bachvogel, is a time for tshuva. It's one of the leading Parshas Shkalim. is everybody gives a half a shekel. That's the last important Shabbos. That's when we're having kibbutz golios. Everyone's supposed to start coming to Eretz Yisrael. All the Ukrainians are coming to Eretz Yisrael. Everyone's getting ready for Mashiach. And now, as Zachor is, we're supposed to eradicate the evil from us. Remember the Amalek within us, eradicate the evil. And after you eradicate the evil, then comes the Tahara of Para and of Nisan and of Pesach. And Mirz Hashem, Mashiach should be here very, very soon. Hayom im Bekolo Tishmo. All right. Thank you very much for listening. I wish you all a wonderful. Let's have the right kavanas, Parsha Zachor, to eradicate the Amalek within us.
Thank you so much, Tamara Khan. That was terrific.